Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do. But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
Azure Stevens against Brianna Jones, tipped around by Dangerfield. The WNBA in Boston is Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players, past and present. Hey there, folks, it's me, your only host this week, James, but it would be a pretty poor show if I was not joined by at least one guest. Please introduce yourself.
That's right, it's me, the very special guest, Xavier, who is not being introduced as someone he does not know by Diaz and having to make up something on the spot.
I should have put you out as here to talk some more shit on ESPN, not mentioning the Sun Sparks game at TD Garden is our very special guest, Dejanay Carrington. Welcome, Dejanay. But yo, what a fucking week for women's sports. You want to go first or should I, Xavier?
Oh, can I?
Please.
Because that was my big thing I really wanted to talk about.
I have a feeling I know at least one thing.
The NWSL.
Yeah, dude.
So for those who don't know, the NWSL had a CBA through 2026. It's been such a fucking phenomenon that's been so successful. They renegotiated it early. And as part of this renegotiation, so the minimum salary in the NWSL back in 2013 was $6,000. And one of the big things that players needed was housing stipends because you can't live on $6,000. There were even those things that minor league players have where you live in a guest house, like a sponsor family.
Like, you know, when you go travel abroad to Spain and someone puts you up in their fucking attic for 6 months.
And this is a professional soccer league. And unlike MLS, the NWSL is one of the best in the world. It's pretty much the NWSL, La Liga Femenina, and the Women's Super League as the three best women's leagues in the world. And one of the problems holding them back was salary cap and a couple other player movement issues. The salary cap this year was $1.3 million, is being moved to $2.7 million for this upcoming season, all the way up to $5 million by 2030 when the CBA ends. Minimum salaries are going from $40,000 this year to $80,000 in 2030. So in the space of 17 years, minimum of $6,000 to $80,000, which is incredible growth for a young league. And I've seen multiple women's soccer leagues fail in the U.S., and it's so exciting to see that they've kind of done it right this time.
Yeah.
But the big thing, this is important. I've talked earlier this year about the insanity of the expansion draft with players being traded 4 times to get back to their own teams.
Do you want me to say the exact quote that the NWSLPA put out in regards to this, the last line of their press release on it?
I know what it is, but I do want you to say it.
Notably, the terms negotiated by the NWSLPA will establish the NWSL as the first American major pro sports league to abolish the draft.
That's right. There is no more draft. It is going to help the NWSL compete internationally in that there is no more artificial restriction on player movement. There still will be some rules on signing players under 18 in order to avoid, what Chelsea's doing right now in the Premier League in buying 40 players that are 16 years old for a combined $300 million. But it's still a massive change and really important for the NWSL because we've already had multiple times where, the number one pick has essentially decided where they're going to go. I mean, we had it happen last year with Alyssa Thompson, who would have gone to Gotham, but did not want to leave Southern California, which makes sense as a teenager. So they had to engineer trades so she could get picked by Angel City. It makes sense. It makes sense for a professional women's league to get rid of the draft because it's not necessary. Enough of the teams have shown a commitment to winning to the point where it's not a worry that there's going to be teams like the A's who just, if they can't draft the best player, will just essentially fold. I don't think that's going to be an issue. My only negative, they negotiated this CBA in Philadelphia, and they won't give Philadelphia a team.
Maybe it's a hint.
It better be a hint.
Did we mention that? So this is the biggest thing for me. Draft is huge. I will say salary cap still existing. Like, that's more of an anti-labor thing than the draft is. But hey, did we mention that every single player can now veto any trade?
Oh yeah, it's a lot. It's great.
That's
freedom.
The hugest thing to me is like the ability to stop a team from, once you have signed a contract, telling you to fuck off.
And all contracts are guaranteed, which was not the case before. There's also like increased bonuses for players that win trophies and get individual awards. And they also are giving like longevity bonuses to players who had been in the league for 10 years and really, spent the bulk of their career in the time where they couldn't earn a lot of money. It's not a huge bonus, but it's still like a nice little token that the players negotiated to make sure the women who blaze the trail get a little bonus. It's fascinating. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out and if MLS tries to, take this idea too, because the MLS draft is pretty much irrelevant. Like, there's essentially one player from every MLS draft who ends up doing anything. The NWSL draft, at least, there are significant like numbers of women coming through that are extremely talented, but that's more of a reflection of the fact that women's academies are still so young compared to some of the men's academies, which are just really kind of getting into the flow. Obviously, I don't expect to see this in any other professional sport, but it is important to have CBAs that are really pro-player empowerment being negotiated in the U.S., because that'll help everybody in every sport, regardless of whether, the draft stays in the NHL and MLB.
Rising tide lifts all boats, baby!
What other women's sports things are exciting you, James?
The TD game between the Sun and the Sparks was excellent. For what it's worth, Sparks 61, Sun 69. Very nice victory for the Connecticut Sun. Like, after seeing this season of PWHL set so many attendance records, they're good at the TD Garden. That's awesome. Doing anything publicly without the W, always great. We'll have a lot of W conversation later. We still have some more women's sports conversation because it is cycling season, once again, now that the Olympics is wrapped up. The Tour de France Femme, only 8 stages long instead of 21 stages long with a couple days off. Entering stage 8, we had 10 women within a minute and a half of the potential like GC qualifying time. I'd say after a minute and a half, like no fucking chance. Even the guys at the end of the minute and a half, And I truly, Xavier, I know you didn't watch it. I don't want to tell you a single other thing about it. I want everyone listening to this that enjoys sport to watch like some condensed highlights video of the finish of stage 8 of the Tour de France Femme. If you think 10 women going into it within a minute and a half of the GC title is impressive, legitimately, I think it's, except for maybe like the Lizak finish in the 4x100, the greatest racing finish I have ever seen, regardless of sport.
Ooh, you got me fascinated now, James.
It was fucking great. Which is good, because I do have one other thing that's making memories for me in the world of cycling, and it's a little bit dumber, and this one's on the men's side. We've said all the lovely things about all the women that we're very excited for. Let's talk about something really dumb that the men were doing. We are in the 3rd big Grand Tour of the season. We had the Giro d'Italia, we had the Tour de France. It is now the Vuelta de España. It is the big Spanish tour. Not following this one as closely, because my boy Poggy is not in it. He's still tired. He did not compete in the Olympics. I'm keeping up to date, but I'm not like listening to the daily podcast for it as I was during the Tour de France. However, I was keeping up to date enough that I heard about how they started stage 6 of the Vuelta. Have you heard how they've started the Vuelta stage 6, Xavier?
You know I haven't, so just tell me.
I know. So have you ever heard of Carrefour?
No.
Carrefour is a Spanish supermarket chain, and they're very big sponsors of the Vuelta. And so, in stage 6, they began the race inside a supermarket.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I do like that a lot. That is pretty good.
It's Roglic, the other Slovenian, the non-Tadej Pogačar Slovenian, is currently leading. And it's just him fucking leading the peloton out of a dairy aisle in the middle of this Carrefour. Like, pictures, incredible. The video, very stupid.
It's honestly making me think of Supermarket Sweeps, the Top Gear version they did, where they were driving hot hatchbacks through a supermarket, trying to get through the aisles, and just the mess that caused. And I'm picturing that, but a pack of cyclists.
Yeah,
like
pretty much.
swarming it like piranha.
Well, and like, I truly, like, one of the most impressive things to me about cycling is just not crashing constantly in the peloton. Like, that is something I have no experience in, being in that kind of like large mass of humanity while biking. So incredibly impressive to me that anyone gets through that in normal conditions. This is fucking bonkers, and it should be said, like, the reason that they can pull this off, you can't really charge for tickets for the Vuelta or any of the big tours, any of the races. People just show up on the sidelines and watch from there. And so, like, the sponsor money is really the only money that the teams have. The red jersey, which we had the pink jersey in Italy, yellow jersey in France, red jersey in Spain. The red jersey itself is like very sponsored by Carrefour. They're the main sponsor for it. This is fun. It is at least outside the box. I'll give them that. Like, it is interesting to see them try something different. Of all the things that they were going to try for an out of the ordinary start to a biking race, this was very, 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 very far down on my list of guesses. But it sure is making memories for me.
I'm glad that's making memories for you. I did have two other things that are non-women's sports related. So one, backyard sports is back, baby.
Oh shit, yeah, dude.
Playground Productions has apparently got the rights to backyard sports, and they put out a short teaser on Tuesday.
It's a great little bit of animation, frankly.
Looks like the plan is that they're going to be bringing back backyard sports in the foreseeable future. I really, really, really hope they keep it as simple sports, one-time purchase for the computer or the Switch or consoles, but don't try, like, I feel good based on the teaser that they gave, but I don't want it to be a mobile app with microtransactions, and I don't want it to be them trying to make CGI the same hand-drawn.
Yeah, Super Mega Baseball is the template. Make that with cartoon kids, and you're fucking golden, guys.
You don't even have to do that much to it. It could be a small game that costs $20, and people will buy it.
I will spend $60 on this. Like, I will make an ill-advised purchase and spend $60 on this.
I think it's harder to sell nostalgia for $60, but if it's like a $20, $30 game, I think you could sell nostalgia pretty well on that. Either way, I'm excited to see what happens. Fingers crossed it comes out well. And then the last thing, dear listeners, you may remember in episode about 6.5 months ago, I vociferously voted against Jamie Vardy being recognized by this hall because I believed that there was still more yet to come. And
did Jamie Vardy have anything left, Xavier? Anything like still remaining?
Jamie Vardy, after chugging a Red Bull, still had some shit to prove because on Monday, Leicester were playing Tottenham back in their first game back in the Premier League since their promotion. This is not expected to be a great year for Leicester because their team is not that good. They didn't sign that many new players. They lost some of their best players, and they're also expected to get a points deduction for violating PSR rules from before they were relegated the first time, which fucking sucks that they're getting penalized for it now. And they were dominated by Tottenham in the first half, but Tottenham only scored once. There is a picture of Jamie Vardy crushing a Red Bull in the tunnel, coming out after halftime. And then Leicester were good. And Jamie Vardy scores a header to equalize it. Leicester ends up drawing 1-1, a great result for them against the team that's hoping to be in the top 4 this year. And in perfect Jamie Vardy fashion, when he is leaving the pitch, he points at his club badge and himself and holds up a 1, and then points at the Tottenham fans and holds up a 0 to signify that he has a Premier League title and they do not. It was the most Jamie Vardy thing ever. And even if this is the high point of this return, because fucking 37 years old, these like 37-year-olds should not be able to do stuff like this in the Premier League. he at least had more shit to prove for this first week of the season, and it was phenomenal.
It's going to be a bummer when he gets busted for PEEDs. Performance-enhancing energy drinks. And with that terrible joke, dear listener, let's go ahead and move on to our main segment for the day. We have an absolutely phenomenal conversation coming up about a wide range of things. We got some women's sports. We got some trans rights in sports. And most of all, we've got feelings to discuss. So let's go ahead and throw to a phenomenal conversation that Xavier and I had earlier this week with a new friend of the show. Ladies and gentlemen and everyone else, if we keep getting authors on this show, we are eventually going to have to start a book club. No book club today, but we are thrilled to welcome yet another author to RTG. This time it is the author of Mind Game, an inside look at the mental health playbook of elite athletes. Please welcome to the show, Julie Kliegman.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you doing today, Julie?
I'm doing great, thank you.
We are thrilled to have you. You just released that book we mentioned, Mind Game, this past year. Prior to that, I'd read a bunch of your work around the same subject at Sports Illustrated, touching on that topic. To start things off, when was it that you first decided that Jimmy Dugan was wrong? When did you decide that, yes, we do actually need crying and feeling in baseball and sports in general?
I think I've pretty much always known that, to be honest. I've been writing about mental health in sports a long time now, and even before then, I was an athlete growing up, at the middle school and high school level. That shit is stressful, I've just kind of always had this mentality towards sports, we're putting people through a lot, and, crying is going to happen.
You before described mental strength just essentially as another attribute to kind of be evaluated in players or quantified, not necessarily as this dude can't cut it because of X, Y, and Z. But I very much agree on your end that in the expansion of the discussion around that mental health, the impression I've gotten from what you've written and just at large is that there were really two groups. Feel free to correct me here if you think this is out of line, but I see two groups of athletes kind of leading the way on this. And I would break those down as Olympians and NBA players. I think of with Olympians like Michael Phelps and Simone Biles, and then I think about Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan on the NBA side. And I have a personal theory as to why this is, but I wonder if you think there's a particular reason that these two groups kind of lead the way in the mental health discussion, at least initially, it seems.
That's such an interesting question and theory. And I think with the NBA part of it, I think it's just always been such an expressive, personality-driven league that players, especially successful ones like DeMar and Kevin, feel like they do have the leeway to come forward and feel, they're nervous about it, I'm sure, but feel reasonably confident that they aren't going to lose their jobs. Then, yeah, on the Olympic side, I think it's a different thing going on. I think it's more of and this is just a knee-jerk reaction to your theory, but I think it's more just I don't want to say out of desperation, but I think there have been so many Olympic cries for help in recent years. I mean, you look at Michael Phelps's documentary, The Weight of Gold. You look at that conversation really starting to change, and it's out of necessity that Simone Biles was hey, I need to take a step back. I mean, that wasn't it wasn't something she had the luxury of sitting on for a day, a week, a month. I mean, she had to speak up for herself. I can't
go back out for this run later today or I might die.
Exactly.
So my pet theory as to why this is, Olympians and basketball players, no helmets, no hats. We see the faces all the time. And I think there is something about the visual connection to faces, to facial expressions, and to the idea that their faces are just out there publicized more. Pictures of football players, yeah, some of the promo shots you will get faces and stuff, but also some of the promo shots are going to have full grills on their helmets. Baseball players, when you put a helmet on, sorry, all the white guys look alike. And of that nature, it is just different. It is easier to differentiate between Olympians and NBA players than it is between the other sports. And I think that increased personality, like you were saying, it is a personality-driven league. I think that's kind of come from this. I think these ideas are all intermingled. But that is my pet theory as to why. If they were all wearing helmets, who knows which one would have come first. But I do think that's a big factor in it.
Yeah, completely. And then like you look at the NBA and maybe they have been more vocal than, their sister league because of, they don't have to face exactly the same stereotypes. I mean, they still face stereotypes as like men coming forward about mental health, but like it's not like they're gonna be like, "Oh my God, you're so weak, you're a woman." So it's like that plus everything you just said.
Yeah, all they have to deal with instead is. Don't think I'm necessarily a person to say anymore about like De'Erica Hamby's ongoing things with my frankly beloved Las Vegas Aces, but man, that sucks shit. Just all of that.
Oh yeah, I mean, oh God, and the way the Aces have been handling it is just, to me, it's disappointing
Not
so
good.
far.
Yeah, no, I'm like really genuinely disappointed to have been as big of a Becky Hammon fan as I have been for so long right now.
Yeah, not the best look for her going on.
Nope. But speaking of women in sports, the unfortunately now defunct podcast Spinsters is how I first became aware of you. And the reason that I first heard you talking about there, you are non-binary like myself, and another issue close to your heart is trans issues in sports in general. At that time, you were talking about a lot of like the statewide transport bans that had just gone in. Now, you are working on a new book about Renee Richards, transgender tennis pioneer. What I know about Renee Richards, she's been a guy of the day for this show for some of our like online stuff before. So I've done a little bit of digging into Renee Richards. And as far as I know, about a decade ago, what is interesting to me is that she was out there saying that there are difficulties in integrating transgender individuals into sports. There are biological differences that make it a troubling thing to deal with. And I wonder, as you're starting to put this project together, what it is like to reconcile those views when most of the people who hold those views are against like Renee Richards existing in the first place, let alone actually being a tennis player.
It's been a really interesting challenge to kind of like square away her views in my head with my own views. I've had the privilege of chatting with her many times now, and she's been really cooperating with interviews and stuff for the book, and I'm so appreciative. And we've also had discussions that get kind of hard, right? About her views around not just, trans people in sports in general, but her own participation in tennis in the 70s is something that she has complicated feelings about. And, that's, of course, her prerogative. But yeah, it brings up, kind of like an intergenerational divide. It brings up like political divides between us. It's, oh man, there's so much going on. And I hope anyway, that that's what makes for a good book.
A complex figure like Renee Richards being at the center, I think, likely makes for a very good book. One last question before we get into your presentation today, because eventually we are here to talk about some guys. But I wanted to touch on something that I said when we first reached out to you. I see a lot of your writing with it being centered around mental health and trans participation as being under the larger umbrella of athletes being able to express the most authentic versions of themselves. I think that's kind of what a lot of that concerns it with if you wanted to try and make one broad sweeping category for it all. And I guess like just a broad sweeping question, and feel free to be as specific or as not with the answer, but where do you think we as a society right now kind of stand in regards to the progression of athletes being able to work towards some apotheosis of being their true authentic selves, or if that should even be the goal, and if there's negatives to all of this? Just your general thoughts on like that true expression of self in the athletic world.
It's a really good question. I think, it's a tough one too. I think that it's okay for athletes who don't want to aspire to that goal on an individual level, right? Like, just like with every performer in other realms, like an athlete doesn't have to bring their whole self to their job, right? Just like we don't have to bring our full selves to our job unless we want to. Like, there are parts of your personality that are like for work and parts that are not. So I just want to get it out of the way first that like, if there's an athlete out there who's like, nah, I don't really want the fans to understand like the real me, like I think that's totally cool. But I think in general, a lot of athletes do strive for that and are increasingly, I hope, given avenues toward kind of like expressing their full selves at their jobs. And, the trans, in terms of like the trans discourse, you know, we are at a bit of like taking a we're yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's even maybe a little optimistic. I'm like, we're kind of
I don't mean to laugh, but you're right. You are correct.
No. Like, we're kind of, I worry at least that we've already decided which part of the fork we're taking. But I think over the long haul, we can change that trajectory. So I do think that we are working toward a spot where athletes can be more expressive of themselves, whether that's with gender, whether that's with political views, whether that's with like physical or mental challenges that they face, whether it's like, I don't know. One thing you've seen a lot in the NBA in particular, again, with the NBA is like, we've seen athletes be more forthcoming about their grief of family members, stuff like that. So, you know, and I think that's, to the public's credit, becoming a more accepting society, however slowly. And yeah, like, but yeah, with the with trans athletes, I'm like, is there a limit to like how expressive we want to let people be? Like, it's so disappointing to me that people think that way. But I see what you're saying.
Way, yeah. In my optimistic way, I was thinking, oh, well, you know, the people who express their true selves as trans individuals, remembering that, of course, the true self of many people is anti that.
Yeah. No, it's only some people can express their true selves.
I mean, well, again, like most things that we see in large-scale polling do seem to indicate that most can express themselves on that, even if most is what, like 51% or 50 compared to 49, and it's a plurality?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard for me to remember sometimes, and maybe hard for others to remember, that like what states are doing and what different sport governing bodies are doing at like the international level is not necessarily representative of like what fans want and think.
And not necessarily popular.
Right.
I appreciate you going into that. I am even more appreciative, though, that you have indeed agreed to bring the Guy-bunal, a guy today, for us to weigh on. Xavier and I are here in the absence of our good friend Diaz, but the two of us are ready to cast judgment, whomever it is you've brought before us.
Excellent. I am so excited. Thank you for allowing me to present a guy to you. So I guess let's get into it. So my guy, I actually have a height chart of this person hanging in my apartment. So I can, you know, in case I forget how tall I am, I can always measure it against this guy. Her name is Han Shu. She is an erstwhile New York Liberty player. And yeah, I'm really excited about this because she's been my favorite WNBA player for a while now.
Really?
Yeah, I realize that's like pretty random, but so I guess I'll say like Han was drafted by the Liberty in 2019, and I went to, this is like a little embarrassing to admit, but because like I now position myself as like a longtime WNBA fan, but it's, you know, my fandom is more recent than a lot of people's. I went to my first WNBA game in 2019, actually. And
beats us by 3 years. Beats us by 4 years. Like that's, I think this is it. Sorry to interrupt, but I think this is something that like anyone who's been following the league for 5 years at this point can keep in mind. If you've been in that long, you are in longer than more than at least 50% of the people that are watching the league now. I would have even said that last year, and now with Caitlin Clark, that has just become even more safe to say. Like, it's weird that you having watched since 2019, I think I came in around 2018, like, we almost are veteran WNBA fans at this point. Like, yeah, there's another level that other people are at, but we followed several seasons at this point.
Yeah. No, that's a good reminder, too. It's, like, all relative, right? Yeah, I just think, like, the Liberty being, like, an original franchise, there have been, like, season ticket holders for, like, decades, which is amazing. But, yeah, better late than never, right? To all of us who weren't on, like, the OG train with that. So Han was drafted 14th in 2019 by the New York Liberty. Later that season, I went to a game. So the Liberty had a rare game in 2019 at Barclays Center in Brooklyn. they were playing in 2019 most of their games in Westchester because of their then owner, James Dolan.
Wait, was this the same arena that like the Westchester Knicks now play in?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. So Diaz was like only 3 years off from getting to work WNBA games. That's a bummer. Sorry.
Yeah. So the WNBA, obviously a bigger draw than like a lot of other events that surely take place in Westchester. Sorry, Westchester. But I caught a game at Barclays when they were there. And, you know, this was before the sale to Joe Tsai and Clara Wu Tsai. And I was just like captivated by Han. The Liberty at this point were like, they had a couple of all-stars. They had like Kia Nurse. They had Tina Charles still at that point, I think. But Han is like the 6'10" center, and she's like magical. Like, I don't exactly know how to put it, but like every time she like steps onto the court, I'm just like, oh my god, I gotta follow, like, not the ball, but I gotta follow Han. Like, she is, I call her my largest adult daughter, with the New York Liberty being my team of large adult daughters. She actually grew an inch a couple years ago. She's now listed at 6'11", which I don't know if I'm supposed to believe that or not, but like, I'll you know, I will believe it. She's 6'11" now. She's still only 24 years old. Yeah, I mean, she's the second tallest player in league history behind Margot Didek, who was a two-time All-Star. She is from China, so she's drawn a ton of Yao Ming comparisons, of course. But, you know, in preparation for this show, I was reading an article that my friend Howard Megdal wrote for 538 a couple seasons ago, and he was basically just like going around asking people in the WNBA like who their Han Chu comparison was, and like nobody had any fucking idea. Like, she's like, players of her height are not seen in the league with one exception, and she can shoot threes. Like, she's incredible. Like, it's just not a combination of height and skill that you typically see in professional basketball. And over the years, like, her hype has only grown. Like, last season, when every time she checked in, like, or was even about to check in, like, everyone at Barclays just went apeshit. Like, totally nuts every time she checks in, even if it's just garbage time. And last season, it usually was garbage time.
That's why we saw so much of her in that game against Vegas.
You know, she did have a really killer game against Vegas, though. It wasn't that one that you're referring to last season, but in 2022, she played a game against Vegas, saw less than 20 minutes on the court, and dropped 24 points on Vegas.
Jesus! Which was 2022. I guess we didn't have Cam Beige at that point, but we still got big fuckers in the paint. So that's pretty impressive.
I mean, yeah, and you had a championship team.
Yeah.
So she's like my hero. She has not been in the league this year, we should say, because she was preparing for the Paris Olympics with China's national team. I mean, I hope to see her back. I don't know if anyone's going to sign her to like a rest of season contract this year, but I would love to see her, obviously, on the Liberty. And yeah, I mean, I think like we've talked about spinsters already in this recording, but like, I think it's worth bringing them up again because in 2021, they did a great episode with Alex Wong joining Jordan and Haley and talking about the history of Chinese basketball players, or the lack thereof, in professional U.S. basketball. You know, there was like a men's Chinese barnstorming team in like 1939, I think it was, as Alex reports in the episode. But like, we so rarely see like Chinese players in the NBA and the WNBA, or Asian players in general, even. So I think there are few role models out there for Asian people interested in playing basketball. This is according to Alex, and I think it's pretty clear that he's right. And Han Chu is now one of those players, and I just think that's beautiful.
So that's something that Diaz has recently touched on in our Olympic discussion, because we looked back at the fact that, you look at Barcelona, and following Barcelona, you've got this big movement of Spanish players that are going to involve the Gasols, it's going to involve Ricky Rubio, it's going to involve all these guys. And you would think they're already being Yao Ming, they're already being like the teams like the Rockets and the Warriors that make a lot of trips out to Japan and China, and that they then had these 2008 Beijing Olympics. You would think that that might spark something, because it was a really good basketball tournament. Well, okay, it wasn't necessarily a good basketball tournament in terms of like competitiveness, but it was an entertaining basketball tournament.
Right.
And there's really been like no build from that. There hasn't been any groundswell from getting to see that on home court. So, I mean, hopefully Honshu can make a difference, but it does seem like the question is like, who needs to come over and be that first person to get everyone energetic? Do you think Han has a chance to be that person?
I want to say yes, but I don't think she's like even super well known outside of like WNBA like nerd circles.
Sure. So even not because I did a quick look. We've got a Chinese League MVP here.
Yeah, we sure do. Yeah, I think like I have no sense of how well known she is in China. Like that's something I'm just not like aware of. But I do think like when there are so few players of a certain nationality in the league, like I do think every player helps. And she's not going to be an all-star, in this league, but she's here. People love her. Like fans love her. She does get minutes, even if she doesn't get as many as I personally want her to. Thanks, Sandy Brondello. But yeah, I mean, maybe I should be more optimistic. I like the way you're thinking.
I do love Han. Big fan. I had her on our fantasy WNBA league just because wasn't putting up any points whatsoever, but I just loved having her on the team. I was actually looking because I remembered seeing something a little while ago. There is a 7'3" woman on the teenager, I should say, on China's
like
under
17?
18. Shang Shiyu. She's 17, and she just dominated the under 18 Asia tournament, averaging 35 and 13, winning MVP. China did lose to Australia in the final, but she did put up 42 and 14 in that game. So who knows if it doesn't. I'm sure the height has a lot to do with it.
So we could get the two of them on. You're saying there's a Twin Towers lineup in our future for Team China.
There is a very good chance that the next time we see the Chinese women's basketball team on the world stage, they have two really, really, really tall anchors. And we could see Shang Shiyu in the WNBA at some point if her game continues to grow. Obviously, when you're that tall, you have worries about other issues if you're that tall at that height. But fingers crossed that doesn't happen. But we could have a resurgence of the Chinese national team.
Do you think their Twin Towers look is more Tim Duncan, David Robinson, or Rudy Gobert, Victor Wembanyama?
Well, Han isn't nearly as tall as Shang Shiyu, so
but
I think it'd be
Han's got the sharpshooting though. See, that's my thought. You've got someone going out to the 3-point line, which frankly you do not have with any of these Spurs that I listed. Well, I guess Victor Wembanyama is the one Spur I listed that can. All the rest of those players cannot for the life of them hit a three. Love you, Tim Duncan. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the sharpshooting is like why we're here talking about Han in the first place. So I do think that's a really great point. I hope we see the Twin Towers look for China. I don't know. I hope we see anything that makes women's basketball more competitive in like Olympics and FIBA World Cups and stuff like that. I think we sure got a taste of it with US versus France in the Olympic final. So
they almost didn't win 61 games in a row.
And Gabby's back. Gabby signed with the Storm today.
Yes, I saw.
I'm both excited and worried in that I had read an article yesterday that technically could be better for her not to sign with the WNBA this year because the Storm can now designate her as a core player and pay her less next year than if she just came over next year. Mm-hmm. But I hope that doesn't happen. I hope. Because Gabby was incredible during the Olympics. If anyone deserved a gold medal on that French team, it was her. As an American who's very patriotic in the Olympics, I'm very happy that her foot was on the line. but I do want
you-
to see more Gabby playing basketball.
Well, here's the thing, like, they had Maureen Johannes, like, bringing the ball up the court, who obviously, as Liberty fans, we worship, but do you think they should have just had Maureen keep the ball and chuck a three? Because, she's incredible from three. Like, do you think that would have... I don't know. I can't help but think, like, maybe don't give your best player the ball, but that sounds insane when I say it out loud, so...
I mean, I think they were riding the hot hand at that point,
Yeah.
and Gabby had been... Especially in the last couple of minutes, Gabby had been so good and had already hit the three so recently. I think there was no way they were taking the ball out of her hands for that one. And again, they were a foot away from it working. So
Right.
the closest anyone's ever come to beating the U.S. women's national team on the Olympic level in how long?
Yeah,
Ever?
way too long. Oh my god, that was killer, that foot. Like, but yeah, I was like, maybe Maureen should have had the ball, but I understand, like, you're absolutely right. There's a 0% chance that would have happened.
Now I'm just thinking about other former Barclays Center resident Kevin Durant and his foot on the two and the end of the Brooklyn Nets big three that played 13 games together or whatever.
Oh my god.
It's crazy that was, 24 months ago that they were still on all the same team?
Yeah, it's like, I can't even tell you, like, it wasn't really something like 13 games. That's incredible. Like, it just feels like...
I believe games with all three of them on the court. It was something like
Okay.
13 games. It was very close to that. Yeah, they were all on the roster for like a year or so. But
Right. God, I feel like I'm a Nets fan, unfortunately, and that, like, really tested me. Signing Harden in the first place, I was like...
it didn't seem fun for the Nets fans.
Right, all three of us, yeah. And I'm being generous there, I think, like, maybe just me. But, yeah, it was not a fun period at all, especially because, like, we had so many fun guys on the team, like, beforehand, and, like, I don't know, I guess
the like, early
now the
2010s
Cavaliers
Nets,
have them.
Yeah, the early
Yeah.
2010s Nets are one of the most guy-dense, good basketball teams that I think we've ever had.
I think that's true, yeah.
Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Allen. Now, I don't think D'Angelo... Well, we'll see at the end of D'Angelo Russell's career if he's a guy. Those other two have it locked up. D'Angelo Russell, there's enough,
sure.
I think, additional criteria. That was a bummer. Han Shu is not a bummer. Let's return to Han for 1 second and the fact that she is like a Chinese League MVP, because that also brings to mind, on my beloved Aces, no longer on the Aces, but Jisoo Park from Korea, also like by far the greatest player in Korean basketball. And in both those cases, it's amazing to see these people that have dominated their sport because their sport is still not in a nascent era because it's been going on for a while, but in a more protozoic era. They come over here and like Jisoo Park also ate up garbage time minutes. Like that's what her job on the Las Vegas Aces was. You know, they're putting up 2 points, 2 rebounds a game, and then you'd get in the off season all of the tweets about their international performances, and Jisoo Park's fucking cleaning up at every single game. And I mean, I love that seemingly Honshu is perfectly happy with that role, as Jisoo Park largely seemed to be while here in the W. There's always seemed to be this recognition when we talk about other people we've gone through, like a lot of Australian players, Lauren Jackson notwithstanding, many of them do take lesser roles when they come over. And anyone who's been in those like other big leagues has always seemed to understand that coming to the W, even though the W's younger than like some of the other professional women's teams. So I always think that that's going to be a point in a guy's favor when they can like come over and adjust their game to this top league. So to know that that is an element of Honshu, that she is not just, that she's not always been a bench player, that there is the accepting of the bench role. Enormous criteria.
Yeah, I think that's really to her credit. Like, obviously, especially when you look at like the men's league, they don't always accept their bench roles. Like, I think there's a little bit less ego, maybe in the WNBA. Feel free to disagree with that, but I think there is.
No, I could not possibly agree more. As someone that is just blocks away from the Carmelo Anthony Community Center here in Baltimore. Like, yeah, no. Sometimes people in the NBA don't accept that they are not the same players as they once were.
Right, yeah, and like Han, she's been learning more English, and I say this in service of saying that she's been more expressive when communicating with the press the last couple years, which is cool to see. So it's all to say, like, I don't know exactly how she feels about it, but from like, I haven't talked to her, I'll just say that. But in her interviews the last couple years, press conferences and to reporters, like, she's seemed like, definitely like you're saying, like, happy to accept her role, eager to just like play a bit part on an incredible super team. I don't know if you guys consider the Liberty a super team, but where you stand on that whole debate. But I think they are. I mean, there's so many people within the W.
Are there people saying that the New York Liberty are not a super team?
Well, they don't think the Aces are either. They just hate the super team narrative. And I'm like, but that's what they are.
Honestly, I also disagree with the Aces. The Aces are also like a super team. I would say the Aces super team status slightly below. Yeah. They only have one former MVP. This is not to say that it's not going to be an incredible finals when the two of them push it to 5 and the Liberty do eventually win. And Xavier, you are as happy as you'll ever be.
Hey, as a 2-decade-long Liberty fan, I will be very happy because right now I support 2 different teams that have existed since the beginning of their leagues and have never won anything in the Liberty and the Red Bulls, formerly known as the Metro Stars.
Red Bulls. I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if they can finally get that off their back and get a title, I will be thrilled. I will break out my Sabrina jersey and wear it all day long and just be very, very happy and think back to those old days when I first started watching the Liberty, back when Becky Hammond was cool and not I have to hate her now.
I mean, that wasn't even the old days, unfortunately. Those were the pretty recent days that Becky Hammond was cool.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking like 2001, 2002, so.
Just what a fall from grace.
I mean, I know people are saying, like, maybe people aren't saying this, but I know it might be easy to think, like, maybe Becky didn't do anything wrong, but the league had already suspended her after their internal investigation for 2 games. Do you suspend someone if they haven't done anything wrong? Like, probably not. Like,
beyond doing anything, like, quote-unquote wrong, maybe she did it. Maybe no rules were broken. Maybe everything was, like, fine by the letter of the law, but just
because there's no protections for pregnant women in employment law.
Yeah, I can believe that, we live in a horrible world where literally nothing she did was quote unquote wrong, but it's just so shitty. It's just such an ugly look from the beginning. It sucks. It sucks shit. Good thing all the players are still super fun and also seem to like still have very good relationships with Dearica largely.
I hope so. Yeah. Dearica seems like such a stand-up player, and it's fun when she plays well in the Sparks, even though it's not fun to watch the Sparks in general. Like,
well, the shittiest thing about all of it having been like in the Aces social media for years is that they played up Amaya Hamby so much. Like, they made Amaya Hamby the fucking mascot of the team on social media, which was delightful. No one here is complaining about that. We loved Amaya Hamby. She was incredible. And to, like, take so much of the shine from this player's child and to then completely reject that player when they get fucking pregnant, there are so many things about the specificity of everyone involved that just make it suck so much more. And we keep avoiding talking about it on the show, so for some reason I'm just like letting all of this out now for the first time.
No, I mean, it's good therapy. I'm glad you're in your feelings about it.
We need to express our feelings in sports. Yes, correct.
Yes, exactly. It all comes back to that, right?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good about Hanshu. I do want to just give you one last moment to say, like, we've talked about your relationship with the debut of her. We've talked about a particularly good outing she had against the Aces, but throughout the rest of your time as a Hanshu fan, is there any other moment that you keep coming back to? Is there any other, like, Hanshu moment that you would want to close the argument for her making it into the Hall of Guy with? What is, like, your silver bullet for Hanshu if you have one?
Well, so it actually is related to that Aces game where she dropped 24 points. Afterward, I think there's no better argument than this. After that game against the Aces, A'ja Wilson, famously the best basketball player in the world.
Absolutely.
So after that game, A'ja said of Han, she's different. So if that's not an endorsement, I don't know what is.
It's now H''AN, Han Shu.
Exactly.
Xavier, thoughts on Han Shu?
So obviously I'm biased as a Liberty fan and someone who just likes Han in general. But I also, just from a basketball point of view, I thought it's important to talk about international play, especially with, the fact, again, Han, mostly bench role in the WNBA. So I was looking just refresher on some of the more recent international competitions, like prior to this past Olympics. So in the 2023 Asia Cup, where China did win over much more fancied Australia, statistical leaders: Han, number 1 with 22 points per game. Rebounds, number 1 with 11.8 points per game. Number 1 in blocks with 2.6 per game. And number 1 in efficiency, because they measure efficiency at 29.4. The person in second was 20. So essentially a 50% increase on second place. And then if that's not enough, go back to the 2022 World Cup with, not just the Asia Pacific in Oceania area. China makes it to the final where they lost to the U.S., which, is expected in any competition where the U.S. happens. But in that, back to my favorite stat of efficiency, number 1 is Asia Wilson, number 2 is Alyssa Thomas, number 3 is Brianna Stewart, and then there's Han. So if the only people more efficient than you are those 3 who are dominating it, that's really good company to be in. And she was only 0.3 behind Brianna, so it's not like the 50% jump that I talked about in the other competition.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing numbers into this, because I just go by vibes.
Absolutely. Don't worry. Vibes are incredibly important. Vibes are where we start. The numbers are how we build up the vibes, but vibes are always where we start.
Excellent.
It's all a Justice Potter Stewart thing. I know it when I see it. I just want to say real quick before we move on to this, if the New York Post, when she dropped 24 in the Las Vegas Aces, did not call her Asia, ASIA Wilson, then the New York Post has completely lost all credibility. But
I'd love to wish that happened, but the New York Post doesn't do a lot of back covers on the Liberty, unfortunately.
Yeah, would love to see that change.
That's why you need that title, man. And again, I think you guys are going to get the title, but I can guarantee that one erstwhile member of the Liberty has secured a title today, a particular one. Xavier, would you like to do the honors and bestow this title?
Sure. So taking over for our good friend Diaz, who's not here, it is my great honor to welcome in Liberty legend for all of us based on vibes, Han Shu, to the illustrious Hall of Guy. And hopefully we will see her back at the Barclays Center sometime soon. But for the time being, we can all celebrate just the incredible vibes and efficiency that Han brings to the sport of women's basketball that we all love so much.
Well, congratulations to Han Shu. Julie, congratulations to you for making a great pitch for her. Congratulations to us for managing to find yet another avenue to talk about the 2024 Olympics for yet another consecutive week. But no, truly, this was a delight having you on. I really enjoyed it. It's crazy anytime we get to have a guest on that I became aware of because of being a guest on a real podcast.
This is a very real podcast.
We are so glad you think that. If people want to hear other thoughts that are as brilliant and agreeable as that, where can people find some of your thoughts, Julie?
Sure. I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram a lot these days at JM Kliegman, www.juliekliegman.com. And you can check out my book, Mind Game, that came out in March from Roman and Littlefield. You can find it wherever books are sold.
And if you have listened to us for the first time, or if it's the 148th time that you've listened to us, either way, if you want to find more, you can find all of our stuff at bit.ly/rememberthatguy, all one word, all lowercase. In addition to thanking you, Julie, for joining us, there are some other thanks due. Those go to producer Craig and all the coders behind him, as well as our musical director, Don Ham, for that lovely theme music. And of course, above all, you, dear listener, for joining us once again. We look forward to having another little guest spot next week. But until then, I have been one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
I've been the 5'4" Julie Kliegman.
And I'm Diaz, reporting live from the Netherlands, and as they call our show in this country, Onthoud die Kettle.
What the
Hey,
fuck?
what's up, Diaz?
Get the hell out of here. Go back to Amsterdam being drunk.
Wait.
It is impossible to hear. Let me put you up to my ear real quick. I am in no state to say things that I plan to say. I am in a state to very silly jump in here and maybe be audible. I hope audible and ramble, which I usually do.
Okay.
You're very audible. We can hear you perfectly.
You were coming through clear.
Dude, God bless iPhones. Tim Cook. 5 stars. What a guy. What a guy Tim Cook is.
First time it's ever been said, but you know what? There's a first for everything.
I'm going to go now. I literally just wanted to pop in to say silly nonsense real quick, but I'm sure whatever you're about to record is going to be amazing. I'm still waiting for Yona to see what 50 euros gets him, and I'll give him 50 euros. I'm still waiting for that. If there's breaking news, I will text it. I won't hop back in, but I will text it if there's breaking news.
Okay.
All right. I love you, boys. I'll catch you.
I look forward to you possibly remembering this when it's the outtake.